and welcome back to Last Week On. My name is Adam Straughan, and we are back yet again covering Invincible, but this time, oh boy, this episode blew my face off. This is Season 2, Episode 6, It's Not That Simple. But before we jump into that, I have a very special guest who has come to join me to cover this episode. So, he is the co-host of Coffee and Tequila, and on the YouTube channel AZB, you will see him alongside his husband, Zachary Patton-García. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Alastair Patton-García. How are we doing, Alastair?
Hello, thank you for having me on again, Adam. I'm doing great. And, this episode was so good, I think it did blow some people's heads off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a lot.
Definitely concur with that opinion.
Literally, I reattached mine before we started recording because a lot happens in this episode. Wow. Wow. But before we jump into it, sorry, go on.
I was trying to organize all what happened in this episode, and it was making my head spin. So yeah.
There's like a lot of it cuts back and forth between scenes, and then there's like 3 different storylines going on at one point as well. So there is like a lot going on. They're covering a lot of ground with these last 4 episodes, and apparently the next episode will end in a particular way that fans are not ready for. So I don't know what that means, but I'm here for it. And you know what? Let's just see what happens there. But I want to ask you your thoughts on the last episode, Alistair, so episode 5, which again was a big episode. A lot of things happened there. But yeah, just your general thoughts. Like, what were your thoughts on that last episode?
I really enjoyed it. So I actually watched 5 and 6 together both at once, and then I started rewatching 6 again for this podcast.
Nice.
So they bleed into each other a little bit for me. But I really enjoyed seeing Invincible, at the other planet and doing his own thing and wearing his little skimpy outfit, and then coming back and just having this really big but awkward introduction with everybody else, because everybody else, 2 months is a lot, honestly, for a lot of people. And everybody was living their own lives during this time. And then we get Debbie kind of dealing with this other thing that her husband, now I guess ex-husband, I don't know, they never really got divorced, did, and how she's also not going to let that affect her in a way that she's let everything else that he's done affect her. So I really appreciate the strength that I think that came from her. And then we get this real Coulson and Fury kind of comparison in it as well. So I really enjoyed it. But I think I enjoyed this episode a little bit more than episode 5. Yeah,
exactly the same. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up that Coulson comparison, because it is that. It's like he's almost ready to ask Donald like about Tahiti, and he's like, "Oh, it's a magical place or whatever." Like, you're waiting for that line. It is literally
you're waiting for that line. He actually went up to Immortal and he said, "You should go to Bermuda," and I was like, "What?"
Wait a second.
Because it almost sounded like the Tahiti thing, and I had to realize. I was like, okay, that's not the right guy. So yeah.
But yeah, the comparison is definitely there. But you're absolutely right. Like, Debbie has been really, really understanding, like more than what she has any reason to, really. Like, if she turned around and said, "Absolutely not, Mark, I've been traumatized enough, I want nothing to remind me of my husband, let alone a baby from another fling that he's had, another marriage," absolutely no. So she has been really understandable, and that is very much built upon in this episode as well. But yeah, I agree. It was nice to see like what everyone had been up to for like the 2 months. Obviously, Mark was like rebuilding himself as well as rebuilding the city, right? Of the Thraxan city, which was really nice to see in there as well. But yeah, going into this episode, Alistair, like, we are going to be sweating by the end of this episode because so much happens. Like, we were just talking before we hit record there, and we were just saying like, wow, like, this episode jumps backwards and forwards, and like literally I wrote in my notes, like, just as a recap for last episode, Rex ! Purple baby ! Sequids ! And then Alan ! Which I fucking love Alan, and I was so pleased to see him at the end of episode 5. I love that so much. He's just one of my favorites, and then to see how much screen time and him coming back in this episode as well, chef's kiss.
Which I loved. And honestly, like, it was weird because I expected Alan to come back, even though it was such an emotional Alan episode. It was my favorite episode before. I think my favorite episode of all the episodes. Well, actually, the first episode and the last episode of season 1 were really good.
Yes.
So I'd say it's in my top 5 of episodes, but I almost didn't like emotionally get that Alan was back. I was like, yeah, of course he's back. And I was like, wait, he's back. And so it took a lot to unfold, because I think that this is like it's so layered in terms of a show, and it's funny because it's not trying to be like the funny. It's not trying to be like a funny animated show, even though it is. It's not trying to be like over the top gruesome, even though it is. It's
Mm,
very real for as unreal as it isn't. So
hmm
I really enjoy that. But there's so much in this that it almost doesn't process in the brain until you kind of like look at it and reflect and explore.
Absolutely. You know what? That's a really good way of putting it. Like, it's one of those shows where it stays in your mind for like a couple of days after when you're still thinking about like the effects of everything that's happened. And like, I've had Ian on here recently. We make a lot of comparisons to stuff like Buffy as well, where it does like a lot of similar themes and explores certain things in a very similar way as well. And it sits in your mind for a little bit afterwards. And you're right, like everything in this, it does have the gratuitous violence and everything like that, but it's with purpose. It's not just in there because, oh, this is a superhero trope, we've got to tick a box. Like everything's got meaning as to why it's there. And, like it does all of that where, and I always say this and I'll come back to it, just when you start to get comfortable and you think, okay, like, I'm starting to get into like the rhythm of the show, I can see where this is going, bam, something massive happens and like wakes you up where it's like, oh, remember, anyone could die at any point because this is a superhero show. This is a Robert Kirkman show. Like anyone can go at any point. And I really still like that about it because it still gives that shock value, right? In a show where you could get so used to like the direction that it's going in and almost kind of second guess it to a degree, but not with this show. I never ever get that. And oh boy, Alistair, do we get that at the end of episode 1 with Rex?
We do.
That whole fight. And like the whole time, like I will admit, I don't know if I told you this before. Like obviously we were talking before I hit record. I own the omnibus as well. I've read so far. I didn't want to read too far, like kind of so I had more of a knowledge of what was going to happen because I still like to be surprised. But then when I saw like what was happening with Rex, I was like, are we going here? Are we doing this? Are they going to kill off Rex at this point? And then, when it opens this episode, so Rex is obviously still recovering from that fight he had. He's obviously lost his hand. The leader of the Lizard League has the gun to his head. Rex repeats that same line again. He's like, just do it. And then we see him shoot Rex. And the bullet goes through his head and he falls on the ground. Were you gasping, Alistair? Like were you all agape? What was your
I
reaction?
I was shocked, especially I didn't care much for Rex, and I
Hmm
think that the writers understood that the audience didn't have as much of a care for Rex unless you're probably a fan of him from the
hmm
comic books. So I don't care much for Rex. I was like, okay, I want to see how this is going. And luckily, I had the benefit of watching episode 5 going into episode 6. So I wasn't like thinking, is he gonna die? Is he gonna die? It was pretty immediate in terms of like going through the motions.
You
But
didn't
let
have
me
the
tell
week to like
you,
wait. Yeah.
yeah, and then also I think it's interesting because Rex was very much a one-dimensional character for us before. He was the guy who cheated on his girlfriend, and he was
Mm.
kind of a douchebag, and he was just all into himself. And we kind of see more layers, like I said, to him after the shooting, after this traumatic event happened to him, and he has to
Mhm.
be vulnerable to people and realize that he does have people in his corner, and I really like that. So I was shocked by him getting up with the bullet hole in his head and it all just being super graphic. And I was shocked when his hand was bit off,
Mm.
though I really like when people lose their arms for some reason in fantasy because I always know they're going to get an upgrade, In
hmm
fantasy and sci-fi, if you lose your arm, you're going to get an upgrade. I feel like that's the key to everything else.
hmm
You have that with Coulson as well. Um, no, I was shocked. I was even more shocked when yes, Shrinking Ray came out of the body. That was more shocking to me than Rex Plode getting up.
Oh, you know what? Like, yes, because, and I think the reason why that is, and I had this down in my notes with that moment in particular, that it happened and then it went away. You know what I mean? Like, and then even Rex said, like, oh my God, she's dead. And then we just assumed, all right, well, that must be it. And then obviously when Rex like took the guy out, when he like blew his head off with the thing still in his hand, we are like, oh, okay, well, then they're both dead. Whereas the Rex thing was built up more where, like, he was laying on the floor, he was covered in blood, and then the guy appeared behind him. The gun, it's all built up a lot more dramatically. Whereas Shrinking Ray was like, she kicked ass, like, definitely. But when she went inside that
Oh
guy,
yeah.
and then he was like, crunch, crunch, and like, blew out the blood bubble or whatever and said, yum, or whatever it was, like, you're like, oh my God, she's gone, like, straight away. So it was a surprise, actually. And I was shocked as well. I was like, oh, she is actually back. Here we go. But I will say this about Rex, Alistair, and it'll be interesting when we talk about the show more often in the future. Rex is now one of my favorite characters. And like, when just from reading it, when I first started the show, I was like, I can't stand this prick. He's like every type of stereotype of someone, a character I can't stand. He's obviously written that way, but for me, he's got no redeeming features. Where I'm at with Rex now, he's one of my favorite characters, and this is the start of his arc. And I really love where we're going with Rex now. And I'm pleased they're bringing it into the end of this season because I'm guessing next season he's really going to go into the areas that I love. So yeah, just keep an eye on Rex. He might win you over.
Do you think that we're gonna have an episode like how we had the Adam Eve feature episode before
Hmm.
season two? Do you think that we
Yeah.
might have a Rex Plode episode before season three?
I would welcome it. It would depend on how to do it though,
Yeah.
because it would, with that Adam Eve episode, which I loved, by the way. Obviously, they went back and explained Adam Eve's story, how she got her powers, the friends that she had, and in episode 5, that moment of when she picked up the photograph and you saw her real family, that meant so much more if you'd watched that episode.
Mhm.
With Rex Explode, I don't know how they do that. Like, if they want to go back and explore him as a younger kid, like when he first gets his abilities with the exploding things, like I don't know, or if they jump forward, I really don't know. But it'll be interesting to see, like it would probably be cool to see like what Rex gets up to outside of like the Guardians, because at the moment we only really know him as a member of that and cheating on women. So it would be
Yeah.
interesting to see him like outside of that, but I would welcome it 100%. We then cut to so then Rex gets shot, he falls on the ground. We then cut to the Guardians, who remember last time Alice there was shit was getting real with the sequids. So then, basically Eve had passed out. Mark was like, oh my God, Ruddy was trying to work on the bomb that he used earlier, which blasts out like that sound or whatever it is, that ray which knocks them back. And the Guardians are kind of holding their own initially, but I love when Shapesmith like steps up and he just jumps and like he's basically like Mr. Fantastic, right? When he like stretch himself. And I love when he creates like he goes full on like the flying squirrel when it like puts like its legs out and flies. He like goes fully
Yeah.
like that and jumps on top of them, creates a shield, and he's like, I'll hold them off. And he's obviously jumped on Eve and Ruddy. And like while Ruddy's working on that bomb. Then I love when he's like, right, I'm done. He like spits the bomb up out of the top. And I love this little moment when, Immortal, sorry, goes over, he's going to take the bomb. Invincible goes over and he's like, look, I'll take it. And like the way Immortal looks at him as if to say, no, back off. And he just says, stop it. I'm stronger and I'm faster than you. And you know it. It's like, let's just do what needs to be done in the best way possible. And that's why Immortal says, don't fail. And if you remember back in like earlier on in part 1 of this season, like Immortal did say to Invincible, I'll be watching you, I'll be keeping an eye on you. He's a bit of a dick to him, really. But I just love that he just, you know what, like that hasn't phased Mark.
I think Mark is vastly changed from what happened, at the end of season one, and then what
Hmm.
happened at the end of the first part of season two, where really we kind of saw him. Yeah, he was incredibly strong, but as a ditzy character who had no skill whatsoever
Hmm.
before. And I think if the argument is that Immortal is stronger and faster. I mean, sorry, that Invincible is stronger and faster than Immortal. I definitely get that argument. However, Immortal is definitely more skilled and more capable than Invincible. So I think there is an argument there. However, obviously that was such a small amount of time, and obviously I don't think Immortal was coming at it in terms of, hey, I'm more capable than you
Hmm.
at this. He was more so coming at it as, I don't trust you because of what your father did to me, and obviously his own internal issues of what happened with his uh almost actual death.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that we see that play out throughout this episode, and we're probably going to see that play out a little bit more throughout the season.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're absolutely right there, Alistair. Actually, it is more from a space of like it's trust, right? And he's still got that, like, last time he saw, like, obviously Mark, there was that big fight, and he obviously watched Mark's dad like kill him. And we do get reference to that when when Immortal talks about like his death through the years and how it affects him. And it's a really interesting exploration that we go on with the character of Immortal in this episode in particular, with like how he gains a level of trust and how he's able to trust people or not trust people, and what his first like instinct is going into something. So yeah, it's a really interesting take on that. Actually, I really agree with that. Obviously, then Mark then goes forward. He gets the bomb. He goes over. He then like blows it up. All the sequence are knocked back. They briefly take over Eve and Ruddy, and then Mark hits the bomb again that blasts them off. But then we see that OG astronaut, which you remember way back in season one, which Livingston, I think his name is, which he was taken over by the sequence and became their leader. Then we cut back to the Lizard League leader and Rex, as you said, obviously, Alistair. He shot him. He's like gloating on the phone to whoever it is he's speaking to. When Rex gets up and kicks the shit out of him, like I was all here for this. Like I love as
It
well
was
that he's
so
punched
satisfying.
so good, right? It was like I love
Yeah.
he's punching him with the hand that like he doesn't have the hand, so it's just like bones sticking out, and he's like punching him in the face with
Hmm.
the bones. Like I absolutely love that. And then basically just kills him, like just punches his face in. And as you say, it's so satisfying. All this time with blood coming out of the bullet hole in his head. And then the guards appear and they're like, are you all right? And he's like, oh, you know me. I'm practically invincible title card.
Great.
Really, really loved it. Great, perfect. And as you said, Alistair, like the shock here was obviously Rex passes out because Hello's got a bullet hole in his head, but then Shrinking Ray's still alive. Like when, she just bursts out and then she passes out, and you're like, what? All of this, and this is the opening of the episode.
And I forgot that it even played out like that with the reflection between the Guardians having their fight and then
Mhm.
the other Guardians having their fight on Earth.
We then cut back to as you say, the Guardians are bailing out from the Sequids. The Martians, obviously, they run into them and they say, look, we thank you for helping us, but we are going to take Shipsmith. Like, we're going to take him back and we're going to punish him because of what he did. And essentially, they're going to kill him. And I love like
Which
this, like
fair?
yeah, I mean, he caused
Yeah.
like absolute turmoil for them, and then he just left them. Like he just bailed out and tried to escape to Earth and like put it all behind him. So, he deserves a trial, absolutely, for like putting these people's lives through, well, these aliens' lives through hell. But I do love this, like the comedy of this when he's like, I understand. And it just cuts to them all bailing out in the ships.
Yeah.
And like, straight away he's like, they're asking him, like, how do you do this? How do you fire the weapons? How do you do all this? And he's like, I've only been inside of these once. It was a school trip. Like, he's just such a kid in his head. He's like still learning like how to pretend to be human, let alone how to even live. Like, he has literally no experience. And then, Mark then takes out the ships and I love the moment when Immortal and Mark shake hands. Like, when that's kind of Immortal's acknowledgement of like, I trust you now. Like, I get you. I understand your intentions now. And I see you as someone who is capable to help us. And I really liked it. Again, it's a small handshake, but it means so much. And just when we see that moment, it just meant a lot.
It did, yes. I
Mm.
did until later on when he sees evil Mark. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
Mm.
obviously, we get a very small moment again with this storyline. They're kind of keeping up with Ruddy and Monster Girl when he talks about, oh, I was able to overcome my fear. I removed it. And he starts to kind of talk about how he could do that for Monster Girl. And she's like, look, just leave it. And that's kind of building on the moment that they had in the last episode as well, when like Ruddy's always trying to come forward as if he's like a protector for Monster Girl. And she's trying to say, look, we don't have that relationship. And even if we did, you don't need to do that because I can literally take care of myself. Like,
It's
I am an adult in here.
Yeah, she's full on annoyed by him. And
Hmm.
obviously he can't it's almost like he can't separate himself from being a robot
Yeah.
and feeling human emotions. And he sees human emotions as a weakness that he needs to, fix instead of just being a human itself.
And that's it at the end of the day. Like, he hasn't been human for really that long. Like, the intrigue, obviously, with Robot, like when he was Robot, was that, he was slowly starting to develop and understand human emotion. But in order to
Oh,
feel
true.
them, but in order to feel them and to experience that, that's also part of the human condition. And in a way, like he can't understand probably why Monster Girl is pushing him back so much, but he's still got a lot to learn in terms of like what it is to be human and to have conversations, adult conversations with people and how to talk about your emotions and how you feel about things and what is okay and what is not okay to do in a social situation, right?
Well, and,
Um,
and you know what? I'm still figuring that out too. So
we're all on that
yeah.
journey. We're all on that journey, Alistair. That's all of us.
No.
We're all ready right now. We then cut to Debbie, who is our absolute hero. We stand Debbie on this podcast. And yeah, she's obviously looking after the purple baby, which we get a name for later on. Cecil's there. He's basically just saying, look, at the GDA, we've got people that can take care of this, Debbie. Like, you don't have to shoulder this responsibility. And I really like when Debbie turns around and kind of says, look, this isn't about Nolan. It's not about me. It's about Mark. Like, this baby is his only brother. And like, and again, Cecil's trying to say, like, well, we can take that responsibility. She's like, look, I raised Mark. I'm qualified to do this. And I love that. I love that recognition because I kind of said this in the last episode as well, where if Cecil gets his hand on that baby, he's basically got a pretty powerful weapon that he can use, like half Thraxon, half Viltrumite. He can train that up to do whatever he wants. And in a way, that's what Cecil wanted to do with Mark for a long time. And it's still kind of what he wants to do with Mark now. The reason why I put him back in the field is because he said, you do everything that I tell you to do, and you can join us again. Cecil, I think, is looking at it from that perspective. Like that gives him a very powerful weapon, potentially, if he is able to raise it in his own form. Debbie is the right person because if Debbie wasn't in that relationship and if it was just Nolan somehow, immaculate conception, if it was just Nolan raising Mark, then he would have trained him to be a weapon and they would have been Viltrumites, they would have dominated, he would have trained him to be a soldier. Whereas Debbie is the one who's put that humanity into Mark, right? And that she is the best person to look after this baby because she will do exactly the same thing.
I completely agree. Because I think that if Debbie has a superpower, it's compassion, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's compassion and empathy towards others. And honestly, she always gets her feature in every episode. Well, not every episode, but most episodes, she gets her feature, and
Mm-hmm.
she completely nails it when she said, "Hey, I raised Mark, and he just saved the world, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready for this." I was like, "Yeah, you go." Whereas Cecil comes off as a control freak. He really wants to have as many heroes, as much power under his thumb as possible, both to mitigate risk for not having them under his thumb,
Yeah.
and to be able to control them. And we see that both with Mark, the power imbalance for him to control. Hey, I'm going to take away your brother if you don't play my game, and then
Mm-hmm.
also with Eve, he keeps on trying to bring Eve under the aegis of the Pentagon, and Eve keeps on saying, "No, I don't know who I am yet." But it doesn't matter to Cecil because what Cecil wants is control.
And you know what? Like, kind of fair. Like Cecil is, and as we saw in season one, like if shit hit the fan with Nolan, which it did, Cecil and the team are really the only people who are next in line with the Guardians to protect the world. Like they're the only ones. So like fair. Like if he wants to.
He does a job, so
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And like that's what I always like about Cecil is that he's not one of these people who will like butter you up, or he's not one of these people who will like give you encouragement. He just sees straight through all that and just gets shit done. He's like, look, this is what needs to happen. This is what is needed to happen. Let's get this done. I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
And I really actually quite like that about him. Like he's no bullshit, straight to the point. So then obviously Cecil says, look, well, if you need us, like you know where we are, keep me in the loop. Then we go to the Pentagon, and this Alistair, this was gold. I love this. So we go to the Pentagon. It's like the hospital kind of wing of the Pentagon, I guess. And we see the astronaut, Captain Livingston, who's like, he's fine now. Obviously, he's going to be able to go home. He was the one that was controlled the head of the sequence. And then Mark, Eve, and Samson are walking down the hallway. And then who do they see, Alistair? Sitting down in the hospital wing.
Oh,
You remember?
Donald and Immortal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Donald later, because Donald's still going through his ish right
Hmm.
now.
And this very much for me was like, because they see Donald sitting down, and like, I think it's Samson just goes like, uh-oh. And it's like, do you remember the end of Angel season 2 when like they come back from pilot, like, and then Angel walks through the doors and he's like, there's no place like, and he sees Willow and she just stands up and he just goes, oh God, it's Buffy. And like, he just knows. It reminded me of that so much when because he sees Donald sitting there looking quite solemn. He's like, oh shit, like something has happened here. And all of this for me is just, this is gold. I love a good montage. And like this for me,
I
perfect.
like that comparison. I didn't get it when I watched it, but I really do like the comparison where like everything's great. We had a hero team that won, but that
Yep.
doesn't mean everybody's winning,
Yep.
just like we had the Angel team that won and the Buffy team that lost Buffy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
whenever we can compare to Buffy, we will, you know.
We'll always drop back there. Um, but yeah, like, and then this montage of like, as you said, Alice, like we see Immortal sitting holding duplicates like costume and it's like bloody, and we see her in like, a couple of body bags in there. And all of this, like we see Ray's recovering in this chamber and like the heroes are looking on. We've got Rex is undergoing surgery, like Eve's got her hand on the window just watching, she gets upset. And like all of this is to the song Dream Team by Aiden Knight. Now I didn't know this song, but as soon as it started playing, I put my Shazam on. I was like, bam, let's do this. Held my phone up. And I was like, oh, Dream Team. Like so accurate. Like all of them working together, coming together. They thought, yeah, as you said, Alistair, we've come back. Everything's been great. We've got the astronaut back. We've getting away from the sequence. Oh, we've lost major members of our team here. And again, it's like for me, it's perfect. What the show does so well is show don't tell. We got everything from that montage. Everything. And you think back to like, remember when we were talking about the part one of this season when like we had that lovely montage of like Debbie and Nolan when they were going through like their different like
Oh
areas of
yes.
depression, and we got everything from that, and there was no words. This is exactly the same for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. I think they do really well with the montages without them being too cheesy. They're sometimes cheesy, but like cheesy in a very good quality.
Mm.
Obviously, they could have leaned in all the way and made this like a Grey's Anatomy hospital episode where they're all singing. But they didn't do that because there were people were legitimately like in danger, and people legitimately died.
Mm.
Duplicate.
Yeah, and I mean going into this, like, wow, we obviously then go to a funeral with Duplicate, and obviously all the guys are there, and Immortal gives a eulogy, and God, like it was for me, this was so well handled. Like it was beautiful. So when he like, he kind of to paraphrase slightly, but he talks about like, she believed in her own powers, even though she was told that they were a curse. And like she always believed, and I love when he says this, like she always believed that the world is good, no matter how often it kills her over and over again. And like that line is gorgeous, like because that's where her and Immortal can really connect. Because Immortal has lived so many different lives, and he's died again and again and again, has always come back as somebody new. And then even when like after the funeral, like when he goes over but and stands by himself, and Samson comes over to talk to him, he's like, I'm glad it didn't rain. Like Kate hated the rain, and then he reveals his heartbreak and basically just says like this one feels different. I've dated so many women through like all of my time, like of all of my life, but this one hits the hardest. And man, like to go from like this explosive start where there's blood, everything going on, we're running away from like sequence, to then have an emotional beat like this that really lands, like incredible.
And I didn't expect it to land so much during it. Obviously, I feel bad for Mrs. Lincoln, you know.
Yes.
So, sorry about that, ma'am. But we saw Kate's like her reflection on Immortal, and the fact that he finally met somebody who could somewhat understand what he'd been through, and was
Mhm.
also another superhero character that he probably expected to live longer and uh, live longer with him. He finally found somebody that can understand him to a greater degree than anybody he's found before.
Yeah.
Um, and he lost that in a very brutal way. I kept on wanting her to run away during the scene. I was like, just send one of your duplicates Gates to him, and then the other main one run away.
Yeah.
But they won't. Both went after him. Um, and unfortunately died.
I think as well, what works really well is the juxtaposition between going from this scene when we talk about a relationship where two people really understood each other based on their experience, to then going to this next scene with Mark and Amber when they're having a coffee together. And those are two people that can respect the positions that both people are in, but haven't had that lived experience that both share. What do they talk about, Alistair? What do they talk about in their conversation over coffee?
So they are finally sitting down after these like 2 months. Obviously, they've talked before, but then he had to go to space again and come back. And they sit down and they're trying to have coffee together, and it's very awkward and strained, the
Hmm.
relationship, in a way that they both reflect on it. They're like, "This feels like a first date," and he's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, bad first date." Um, and honestly, it's crazy because these are two freshmen in college, and I feel like they are so mature about the relationship, way more mature about the relationship than I would ever expect anybody their age to be. In
Hmm.
terms of they're reflecting, hey, these are really the stressors on a relationship. We're obviously not in sync right now, or at least in sync about not being in sync.
Mm.
and really reflecting on that. And you see both of them. I don't want to get ahead, but see both of them seek advice for it. And it is a legitimate problem. I actually did think about Buffy during it, whereas like, Buffy always had to drop everything to save the world. And
Mm.
it did create a stressor on all of her relationships, her family relationships, her friends, and her lovers. I mean, oftentimes her friends and lovers were powerful people who could accompany her, which I think ameliorated that in some way, where like, hey, you're spending all your time with them, but I maybe it's almost impossible for superhero people to carry on and maintain a relationship with non-superhero people, both because what we saw with Immortal, where he never had a connection like he did
Hmm.
until it was Duplicate,
Yeah.
and we see the same thing with Invincible's dad, where although he was with Debbie this entire time, obviously it didn't mean the same thing to him as it meant to
Yeah.
Debbie because he's lived so long. So I think that there is an argument to be made about, um, I guess, people being with other people who share their experience and understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and I think you put it beautifully there, Alistair. Like the show reminds us with all of the relationships that we have and like how that can go. So as you said, like Nolan and Debbie, like he had very different intentions with that relationship. But what I love is very specific to that is that he never knew how much Debbie would and Mark would get inside of his mind, how that it would turn him effectively to have human emotion. And like he never ever
Hmm.
thought that would happen, which is obviously jumping very much ahead, but obviously we'll talk about that at the end, which is like a flip on that, kind of on that trope, which is really, really interesting. But then, we've got this relationship, which is pretty much starting to break down. And we have to remember, like, these two are like college students, right? They're like really young. And like, they even say these should be the best years of our lives. Like, we should be like hanging out with our friends, like having drinks, probably getting high, like partying, like whatever, like talking about like exams. And yet, like, I have a boyfriend that's going off saving the world and I don't see for 3 months and I have to lie to my friends about. And like, she's not complaining about it. She, in this instance, is just kind of admitting the reality of the situation. And that's what I really like about this, Amber, where, in the last episode, she even said to Mark, I get it. I know what I signed up for. Like, I'm dating a literal superhero. I get it. Like, it's hard. Like, you weren't there with my grandpa's funeral, but I get it. Like, you've got to go and save the world. And then here, it really gets down to the nitty gritty. And then they don't kind of come to a resolution because they say, well, Mark says to her, what do you want to do?
I think the obvious solution is that she needs to jump into a vat of radiation, and then she can also have superpowers. Yeah,
Okay.
get turned into a vampire. Hook herself up to a machine, cut off her arm. There's many ways to make this relationship happen. Come
so,
on, well, let's see some effort.
so basically, we
You
need to
know,
have like Amber the Vampire Slayer, or like we need to have Amber with just, I don't know, Hulk powers or something. She has to be able to fly. Give her like Wonder Woman abilities. That would be
yeah,
incredible.
yeah, do something. Give her telepathy. Something.
That'd be cool. Even if she could just fly and just fly around with Mark, that would be pretty awesome. But yeah, things aren't looking good. But speaking of relationships, Alistair, one of the best relationships we have, two people that rekindle, is when Mark goes back to his dorm room and he finds William's boyfriend Rick is back. So if you remember, way back in season one, when William had his boyfriend Rick and then got captured and he was turned into like this cyborg, and obviously he still had some of his memories, which stopped him from obviously hurting William, and he's gone on this massive transformation. Obviously, Donald's there as well, to like saying he's keeping tabs on like his recovery. But so nice to see him back. So nice to see William happy as well, and like get his happiness, like because obviously William's been through a lot of shit as well, where he had his love, and then his love was very quickly taken away from him, and like everybody else is in a relationship around him except him. Well, not Eve, but you know what I'm saying. But obviously Donald is definitely reflecting on this because Donald has gone through exactly the same thing, and like even when he starts to explain to Mark about the procedure, what he's been through, and like his hand starts to shake. And even Mark's like, Donald, are you okay? And he's like, look, I'm just keeping tabs. Like, that's what I'm doing. And Donald's going, as we said, like Donald has been to Tahiti. Donald is going through hell.
And you know what? I understand that he's going through hell. I still think I don't think it was necessarily the moral choice because you're taking somebody's choice away to do it. But I like that Williams here, and I think that we're going to explore that a little bit more throughout the season and what it means to be him, or if he's really the same person. Because are you really the same person if like 90 something percent of you is actually gone? And I think that's the same thing
Mm,
that he's dealing with, and it's possible that Donald's and him might connect over that
mm.
throughout this season or next season.
Definitely. And I mean, there's even that line, isn't there, later on when like William's showing like Rick around. He's like, "Oh, remember, like this is this area, this is this area," and like Rick's like, "I don't remember any of this." And like, there's obviously that plaque as well made for the people that died during that like the incident when that happened in season one. And like even Rick says, like, I don't remember anything. Like, who am I if I'm not me? If I don't remember anything, like, am I who I was? And like has that kind of existential crisis. And that's very much that, as you said, like Donald is finding out that he found out he died and he was supposed to be dead and he's been brought back by somebody else. Again, Buffy reference. But like he was brought back by somebody else and that wasn't his choice. And he's like, where do you know what I mean? Like, where do I sit within the world with
Yeah.
that? Um,
Where do I go from here?
they all just grab their
You
hands
know,
and sing that.
he just got to walk through the fire. You know,
Jesus Christ. He's like every single night. Right.
the same arrangement.
Jesus. They're all like, Donald, what are you doing? Yeah, so then we go to the hospital. Obviously, Rex is awake now after his surgery. Still looks like hell, but he's awake. He's chatting to Mark. And then, he shows like his kind of mechanical hand with like obviously the hand at the end off. He's going to go for like an Ash from Evil Dead and get a chainsaw on the end of his hand or something. This is interesting when he talks about, and I love this about Rex when he says, look, like, this is horrendous that it took this moment to happen, but in that moment I really saw my life flash before my eyes, Mark, and I saw like how much of a dick I've actually been, how much time I've been wasting being an absolute arsehole to other people. It's like I've treated women horrendously by cheating on them, by just being an awful boyfriend, thinking only about me. And in those moments I saw all of that coming back and it reminded me I've been wasting my life when really these people around me are the best people right now. And like I lost two people like that, what I thought were two people. And that weighed, I think, on him so much more because that could have been him. His life would have been gone. He would have had nothing to show for it. And he would have wasted all those kind of connections and relationships, those proper relationships he could have had with people. And I really love that turning point for Rex.
I like that turning point for him too, but I think that I don't want him to completely pivot like a 180 degrees on that. Because I mean, it is like the serial cheater is who he is, and I hope that they come at it in a different direction. Whereas Mark is like an argument, like we talked about, for dating your coworkers. And, I think Rex is the argument really against it, because you really create that like that bad working environment, and no trust, and how he has to really reflect on how he treated Adam Eve and Kate. But I, I don't know. It's just I'm glad that he's reflecting on this. He's going to be a different man, especially without his arm and hopefully upgrade. But I hope we see him struggle with that, or maybe meet in the middle. Maybe he's just going to be a serial bachelor, and he's just going to be really upfront with women from now on,
Yeah.
until he can actually settle down. We'll see.
I don't think we'll lose the big personality of Rex. Like, I think he'll still be that big personality and, like saying the most inappropriate things at times and like still being like cocky and a bit arrogant, which is what I kind of like about him. But I think they kind of had to explore this with him because if they didn't, he would have very much been just a caricature of that type of character we've seen a million times before. And it almost, for me, it could have come to the point where it's like, oh, here's Rex with another catchphrase, like the type of character that we understand. So in order for him to reflect, I think it's a good point, a good turning point to then start to see this different side to him without fully removing that cheeky kind of boisterous personality that he has, but just showing a bit
Yeah,
more depth. You know what I mean?
kind of like Cordelia.
Yeah, to be fair,
Yeah,
yeah, like
where over time
yeah.
she's still cheeky, but she shows her depth. You
Oh,
know.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, she goes on a journey. But yeah, it's a recognizable character arc that we've seen in people like Cordelia and other characters similar as well. Where it isn't just their only thing is this one thing, right? And then something happens to them, and we start to see a bit more depth when they reflect on them as well. But it'll be really interesting to see your thoughts on the way Rex goes in the future with me dancing around this topic. It'll
Oh,
be interesting to see.
do you know where he goes in the future?
I know more, like yeah, and I won't say any more, but that's why I really like Rex, for stuff that happens
Yeah,
later on.
I know him and Mark get together.
Yeah, I mean, I'd give me
I'm just
that. Like,
I'm just kidding. I don't know if that's the case.
that's exactly what happens. We get fully explicit sex. But honestly, we were saying in the last episode when like Mark flew into the dorm room that he shares with William, and like Mark started to get changed, we were like, shut that window and lock that door because shit's put the sock on the door now because shit's about to get real.
Well, you know what? It's funny because Mark and Amber had all these relationship problems. I don't even know if they had a chance to put a sock on the door. But the first time he puts on a sock on the door is for work reasons,
Yeah,
not
I know,
for
right?
like the other reasons. Yeah.
And that line from Alan later on, which is brilliant. But yeah, we'll get to that. So then, yeah, obviously, Eve passes Mark in the corridor. Obviously, sees he's depressed, and then it's actually Rex who lets slip to Eve that Mark and Amber have separated. And she's like, "Oh, yeah." So then we cut to Debbie going through her Mrs. Doubtfire interview sequence where she's interviewing a nanny. Obviously, spots straight away that's one of Cecil's spies. And then we get April, this other nanny who knocks at the door. And she basically admits, look, straight away, she's like, I am from Cecil, but let me be completely honest with you. And she kind of knows everything. She's like, I know that you were married to Nolan. I know that like the baby is half this and half that. I know that Mark is invincible. Like, I know everything. But I want you to know that, like, I work for you. I don't work for Cecil. You're the one that I'm going to respond to. You're the one that I'm going to take direction from. Anything that you want to know, I'm going to tell you. I don't work for Cecil. And obviously, we get little Oliver, which the name was revealed, obviously, named after Mark's grandfather. Alex starts saying, like, Mama boss. But yeah, what's your thoughts on this new nanny, this April, Alistair?
Well, so first of all, I think that Rex kind of leaned forward in a way. I don't think that Mark told Rex that him and Amber are over. I think Rex kind of took from the situation, hey, this is not going to work out. They're basically over. And that's what he tells Adam Eve.
Mm,
But for the nanny, the missed out fire stuff, I don't trust this nanny because
same.
how is that other nanny that looks almost exactly like her going to leave? And 2 seconds later, she's going to knock on the door. I
Hmm.
feel like, obviously, I don't want to spoil her. I feel like she's a shapeshifter or something. And she
Hmm.
was like, okay, did this. Now let me knock on the door again. I'm going to come in as somebody different based on what information I just got. So that's my opinion on it. Oliver, I like the name. Oliver's a good name.
Hmm.
And Mama Boss, obviously he's growing very quickly. I probably we're probably going to see him as a preteen, I think, by the end of the season.
It'll be interesting to see what your thoughts are with Oliver as that goes forward. He can't even chew his own damn food at the moment right now, Alistair, because Debbie's doing all of that. She's like getting his cereal, tuning up from spitting it back into the bowl. Like, because Thraxons don't
I
have
know.
that.
And Mark is so casual about the way he tells Amber that, and she's like, "What?" And he's
Like,
like,
wait,
"Yeah,
what?
it's a Thraxon thing." But obviously, he lived among Thraxons for 2 months, so for him, it
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, it's the norm."
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
actually,
being fed
yeah.
like a baby bird is not the norm in
Hmm.
for humans. So
Debbie's like mama burden it to him, like straight into his mouth. Um, But yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, Mark did live with the Thraxon for 2 months, and he really got to know like that species and like know how they
the
live. So
culture
yeah,
and all that stuff, yeah.
literally, yeah, he became a culture vulture and absorbed all of that straight away. It makes sense. Then we get Eve going back to her tree house. Cecil's obviously there. He like thanks her for her help during everything and says, "Look, if you want to come back to the Guardians, the door is open." She's still is kind of figuring a lot of things out. She's still kind of like figuring out, as she says, what type of hero I am because she lost the people in Chicago, like during the building when that came down, when she thought she was helping. And then she nearly lost the two people on the bridge, even though Rex did say, look, those people are recovering, they're going to be fine. But she's still really conflicted. She's like, yes, I helped out here, but I'm still figuring a lot of things out. Plus, she gets a lot of shit from her parents still. And she's young, you know what I mean? She's still figuring all of this out. Where she is more kind of used to being a superhero than Mark, she's feeling a lot of the repercussions of what that means along with Mark right now. And yeah, she's still figuring out a lot of that in her mind.
So I think Cecil could have made the argument, which I would have made for her, if I was trying to recruit her, hey, I understand that you're figuring out who you are as a superhero, but I want to provide an environment where it's safe to figure that out, where there are safety nets. Other people who are experienced who are also figuring out who they are, and
Mm.
I think that this is an environment for you, and I think that that might dissuade her a little bit.
I don't know because
Um,
and I'll push back a little bit because she was part of the Guardians before and she did work with Cecil before, so she knows that environment. But I think for me, if that's I'm somebody where I like my own space when I need to figure stuff out. So I think I'd be the same as
yeah, me
Eve, where
too.
I'd be like, I just want to go away like to a tree house myself and just have like a week where I don't like, maybe interact a lot with people just to figure things out in my own head and then come back on my own terms when I'm ready to do so. And I think if anyone's kind of trying to persuade me, oh no, now is your time, well, that's up to me to decide that, right? And I think that's up to Eve here as well, where she's saying, look, I get it. I came on my own terms to help because I knew the ramifications of what the type of mission was. But I need to do that on my own terms for now because I'm still figuring it out. I'm still holding on to a lot of grief and turmoil of what happened. So I can see where Eve is coming from, but I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
her coming back.
yeah. I can as well. I've noticed over life is if you back people into a corner with kind of like logical arguments, it's hard for them to like come out of it. And then sometimes you can come out with half solutions, which I guess it kind of did with, hey, if you need anything, just reach
Yeah.
out to me.
Hmm.
And then he does that creepy thing, hey, you've got a guest, you know.
Yeah. And
And I
who
like
is the?
Cecil's powers,
Yeah.
the teleportation lightning thing, and
He's
I
literally
really like it.
he's doing the charmed thing where like they just the white lighter just nips in, nips out whenever he wants. Like that's his ability. But no, it's pretty cool. In terms of the technology and what he can and can't do, we still don't know the limits of like what Cecil can and can't do. He teleports to places. He has like huge weapons that he uses sometimes and pulls out of nowhere. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, who comes to see Eve, Alistair?
Oh, it's Amber. Amber comes to
Hmm.
see Eve, because we have like the duality of Mark going to
Yes.
see Art,
Hmm.
Mark going to see Art, and then her going to see Eve, and I like that. I really do like Eve's and Amber's friendship,
Yes, Sam.
especially like centering, well, not centering Mark, because obviously it's a bad look to have female friendships centering another man, but they were kind of put into the same, it was because of Mark that they became friends, right? And
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
because of Mark that Amber is going to Eve to like talk this through.
mhm.
And and yeah, I like their conversation. I love her treehouse. I'm glad that she moved back in.
Yeah.
So
Same. And
what would you think of their conversation?
I love it, Alistair. Like this for me, I love that we bounce between both of them, right? So like, and it's interesting the dynamics here because we've got like a superhero and a non-superhero in both situations. So we've got Invincible Mark talking to Art, who yes, he like has experience with working with superheroes, but he is not one. He is a human who makes costumes for superheroes. He knows his dad very well. And like, obviously we've got Eve talking to Amber, and again, Eve is a superhero, Amber is not. And it is very much the conversation, the dynamic of the struggles of being slash dating a superhero. And I really like that we hear all perspectives from that, where Art's a bit more laid back and is talking about it, where, Amber is like kind of really concerned emotionally. Eve's trying to support Amber in that. And like Mark is obviously really emotional right now, saying, oh my God, like it's just more of a burden than anything else. Like they both say, like, and they both cut over where they say, I feel like I'm failing Amber slash Mark. And I love that they talk about this and how they reconcile with both conversations and they're like, why are you talking to me? You should be talking to the other person. Like, and they say you should be talking to Mark, you should be talking to Amber. Like, why are you here with me? That's one of the biggest things in a relationship is the lack of proper communication and communicating your needs, what it is you're trying to say, talking about your feelings. And don't get me wrong, it's for me it's important obviously if you are able to go away and you can trust somebody with that and have that conversation, it kind of can help you to reflect on your own feelings. But they're right. Like this is a conversation which Mark and Amber need to come back to and have that conversation and just kind of check in with each other and say, hey, look, we didn't leave on good terms last time. This is where I'm at right now. This is everything I feel. What about you? And just to check in with each other's feelings.
Well, and I get Because communication is incredibly important in a relationship, and it, it grows and then it deteriorates, and then you find new ways to communicate, or you find out the ways you're communicating are wrong.
Yeah.
But I do like their steps in terms of like, hey, identifying that there's a problem. They go out and find their sounding boards. For
Yeah.
Amber, it's Eve, because Eve is both a close female friend, but somebody who also understands the superhero dynamic.
Hmm.
And then for Mark, it's Art, because both he does understand the superhero dynamic because he obviously works with superheroes, but also he's another strong male figure in his life in the absence of his father. It's kind of him reaching out to his father for advice with a relationship. And I think that Art gave him the right advice, but also it was almost a realization, hey, like, why are you here when you complain that you keep on being dragged out of situations, but you're not taking advantage of your time with Amber in the first place, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of like what he was getting after. Um, and and less so about like the bouncing, and less so about, hey, this is it, you shouldn't be talking to me about this, because you do need sounding boards in life. I think both with friendships and with relationships and with family. And a
Hmm.
lot of times your sounding board is your significant other.
Hmm.
But when it's a problem with your significant other, who do you go to as a sounding board?
Hmm.
Where it's appropriate. And usually sometimes it is your family. And sometimes it's a friend. And it's just it's interesting to like kind of figure that out.
Hmm.
And they both have very like I said at the beginning of this episode, this is the most mature. If it becomes a breakup, it's the most, or even if they stay together, it's the most mature I've ever seen um, people this age deal with uh, this kind of scenario. Which obviously it's a super scenario. It's something that you don't always deal with. But I know for I'm not a superhero obviously, but from myself and Zach, like I'm in the military and he's not in the military, and it's very hard to like always have that the same basis of communication, and I try to explain it to him as much as possible, but there's always a loss of communication, and I always get called up at all times and I have to leave in the middle of the night, or at 5 in the morning, or something happens and I have to leave to go take care of soldiers. And I've seen his frustration where he understands that, hey, he married a military man, and this is kind of like what he has to like deal with at the same time, it's completely valid to be upset about the situation.
Similar as well is that obviously when you're stationed away, like you're away for significant lengths of time as well, right? So, in the same way that Mark is obviously away from Amber for so long, I'm not saying that you're literally leaving the
Yeah,
planet,
months.
Alistair, but
Yeah.
yeah, but like you might
I'm
as
in
well
Mars.
be.
You're gonna oh,
Can you imagine stationed in Mars for
yeah.
3 months? But yeah,
That'll
that's
eventually happen. We'll see.
yeah, yeah. We'll see what happens there, right? But that's a really interesting comparison there, Alistair. And in a way, like you guys can feel the weight of the position of what these characters are in right now. Where it is like two people coming from two different experiences and trying to figure out like in the middle, right? And still carry on having some form of relationship, which obviously what Mark and Amber are trying to do here, because there's still a lot of love there, right? They even say it like, look, we love each other to bits. Like the only issues is here is that we've got this going on where, and it's really important. And it's not like we're not saying one person should back down and one person like should step up or anything like that. It's not about that. It's just dealing with the situation. How do we do this? And and as you said, Alistair, like it is important when we go to our sounding off boards and take a perspective or listen to a perspective that isn't so ingrained within the relationship, just to hear
Mhm.
that outside opinion, because that is something that we can overlook so much or not even think about because we're not able to do that, take ourselves out of the situation because we're so ingrained in it. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it can be really hard for that. So Mark to get that from Art, it's like an interesting perspective for him. And as you said, like Art has had so many dealings with superheroes. He's probably seen this type of situation before many times, and almost is kind of why he chuckles to himself a little bit, is because he's like, oh, this again, like I get it. And then as you say, like Eve is then talking to Amber, and that's the other side of the coin when Amber's trying to like confide in Eve, and Eve is like the superhero. but as well, she's one of the girls. She can see where Amber is coming from as well. So I think this plays into it really beautifully. It's handled really, really well in terms of covering all bases of where everybody is at. I think it works really, really well.
I think it does too, and I think that we really see Mark reflect on his father Omni-Man's relationship with Debbie,
Mm,
and the difficulties they had, and him really not
yeah.
trying to make the same mistakes. Right?
Yes.
He's like, hey, let me get ahead of this. I don't want to make the same mistakes as my father. How do I not do that?
You know what?
And
You're
it's
absolutely
difficult.
You're absolutely right. And the evolution of that, when you remember back in season one, Mark was always trying to be his dad, right? Always trying to be his dad as much as he can. He looked up to his dad. And like it was Debbie that said to Mark, look, don't try and be the best version of your father. Try and be the best version of you. And this is the evolution of that, where now he's doing everything to say, I do not want to make the same mistakes that my father made. How do I not do that? Really, really interesting insight there, Alistair. You're absolutely on the money.
Which is crazy because we kind of get that with the credit, well, like the Invincible logo that we get all the way through season one, where it's his vision of who he is as a father keeps on getting slaughtered, and
Yeah.
then it blacks out, and now we're seeing the blackout pieces crumble where he's
Hmm.
finding himself as a superhero.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a deep show.
We're going deep, Alistair. I love it though. I love it. I love it. This for me is the mark of like great writing when you can pull so much of this out of an animated show about superheroes. And this could have been
Yes.
the generic thing, like another story we've seen a billion times before, but it's so not. The writing's so rich, man. We can talk about this for hours, but we got to do a podcast. But yeah, this for me is just one example of brilliance of this show and how it handles relationships and the writing so incredibly well. So then after this, obviously, we then briefly cut to William. I think we mentioned it before, and his boyfriend Rick. He's showing him around. Rick can't remember anything. And he's like, oh my God, what does it mean if I don't have these memories? Am I me? And then obviously grabs William and gives him a big emotional hug. And I just feel so bad for William because I love William. I absolutely love the character. I really wanted to be happy. And obviously, his excitement of seeing Rick being back again was obviously it picked us up. But then, Rick's going through so much right now where it is that existential crisis of everything you've shown me. I get flashes of what happened, but I don't remember a lot. Am I really me? And, just has that breakdown outside of the fountain in the, outside in the courtyard.
Which also, like, Rick is he's not in the same place as he was before,
No.
at all. And he's gonna have to deal with that in a lot of ways. Maybe his body's changed enough to maybe we'll see him as a super figure at some point in the future, whether it's
Mm.
villain or hero. And William's gonna be starting to go through a lot of these same, like, internal, like thought processes that Adam that Amber and Mark have been going through. And
Mm.
maybe Mark is going to be a sounding board for that. Well, it probably will be, because that's his best friend. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll be great to see more time with William and Mark together, just chatting and hanging out. Give me that, please. I am here for that.
yes.
I hope we do get that. So then we go back to the dorm room, and then Mark starts reading one of Nolan's books because obviously we find out that Art did have a big collection of them that he kept a hold of them. He didn't throw them out. And like he even jokes with Mark, and he's like, "Oh, I never read these. I told Nolan they were great, but I never read them." But Mark is going through them now, and then Mark opens YouTube and starts Invincible reviews it, and he starts reviewing the books. No, I'm joking, but but he starts reading them, and yeah, remember that line what Nolan said to him. Where he's like, "Read my books, Mark." Like, he tells him that line before he's taken off on the stretcher to wherever he's been taken to. This is really interesting because the things that he pulls out of the books here. So obviously we've got like it's these fantasy type books, which obviously, the way that Nolan's framed this, it's like he's written like these fantasy novels where these things happen in space, where people travel to different planets and see these different things. He talks about one hero who has this thing called the Infinity Ray, which is an incredibly powerful weapon that can take down anything. Keep that in your mind. And then the other thing as well is the other book he reads is about these creatures called the Ragnars that live on this planet. And the main hero and the female companion land on this planet. The gravity's very heavy. And again, it's like he leans forward at this point and he's like, this is starting to ring a bell. This is interesting. He's starting to figure things out, right?
Yeah, and he kind of figures out, hey, these are items or people that can make a difference with the fight against the Viltrumites.
Yes.
But I also think that I'm because I'm curious about like the mindset of Omni-Man when he wrote these books, whether he was writing these books as, hey, I know these are things that can defeat me. Maybe in this like reality, this story reality, I can like, figure out, at least fictionally, I can defeat these issues, or
Hmm.
whether he was writing them in the mindset of, possibly hinting at stuff that could actually defeat him in the future.
But it is something to store in the back of his mind, absolutely, and especially for the forthcoming war, which is inevitably going to happen. But yeah, and obviously when Mark had that big fight as well, right, alongside like his father, when he saw how much the Viltrumites can kick ass and literally hold their guts together and still continue fighting, like we got in the first half of this season. So it's definitely one for him to store away. Then we cut to Cecil is talking to Immortal. So he recognizes Immortal's going through a lot right now. He's feeling a lot. Obviously, he's gone through a lot with the loss of Duplicate. And he's trying to give him a holiday. He says, look, like, this is nice at this time of the year. Like, you should go there. And like, Immortal's pissed straight away and he rejects it. He's like, look, get your people outside of my head. Stop focusing on me. I don't want people watching me and like watching my emotional state and everything like that. I don't want this. Get away from like my head, essentially. Stop keeping tabs on me. Then Cecil spots something coming on the radar, coming from space, heading towards Earth. And who is that, Alistair?
It's Alan, our friendliest alien, voiced by
Yes.
Seth Rogen, and he does an amazing job.
Oh, the absolute best. I said this in the last episode we recorded. I think he is literally the perfect person to voice Alan. Like he just
He
captures
is.
so much warmth and like so much humanity in an alien voice. Do you know what I mean?
It's humanity, but it's also like it's funny because he's like he thinks of it probably from his perspective, where he's like, "Do y'all have douchebags? Do y'all have sock on the
Yeah.
doors?" Like,
Yeah.
and they have a really Immortal and Alan have this meet cute in the sky.
Yeah.
You know, hey, I can talk into your brain. And he's like, "Why are you talking into my brain?" But obviously, he sees it as he obviously thought it was Omni-Man, and he wanted out for revenge, and
Hmm.
he didn't change his decision when he saw somebody different. He said, I'm pissed off,
Hmm.
you know, Duplicate is dead. I just had this interaction with my boss. I just want to kick ass.
Yeah. He's a
And
punching bag at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah. Literally is. Like he is Immortal's like furious right now, and then he sees like this alien coming. He doesn't think logically in terms of like, oh, this might be so he just as you said, he thought this was Omni-Man. And then even when it wasn't, he's like, well, you're still an alien coming towards Earth, so and I am pissed off, let's go. And then obviously they
Yeah.
have a bit of a scrap, and then I love all of this when obviously Mark gets between them, tries to explain. He's like, look, he's a friend, and he's like, oh, the whole thing doesn't go three ways, like, and he's like, oh, well, can you tell? And I love when he's like, "Oh, Mark says that he hates your beard because it's missing all the best parts." Like just
Best
dumb
parts.
stuff like this. Like just it works so well. And like Immortal's just like raging, clearly, just seething. And obviously he says, like, "Oh, look, I thought you were someone else," and obviously he goes away. And then
He looks so dejected while he's flying back to
yes.
Earth. Yeah.
Just like shoulders hunched, like just slowly going back to Earth.
Yeah.
And Alan says, like, look, I need to talk to you about something. I did like this little moment of Amber at the college party as well, because we've all been here, Alistair. We've all been
I
here,
miss
right?
you.
Where, yep, to put it out
Yeah,
on
well,
your
you're in a crowd of
phone.
other people. Yeah.
Yes. Putting it on your phone, you're about to send and you're like, nope, and then you delete it, and then, or maybe you send it,
Mhm.
who knows what the circumstances, but we've all been there, right?
Completely get it. In a lot of ways, like, they almost work as a long distance relationship if you think about it,
Hmm.
because they're separate all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's only fair if like they both are happy to, if they both agree to that, and if they're both happy to experience that, which obviously we see in this episode, we're kind of like we're trying to figure that out, like where they both sit with that, but it's not obviously looking good. But yeah, it's like I feel for Amber here, like I really do, and it's weird because in season one I wasn't as keen on her, but this season's really pulled me around to liking her a lot more, and I feel for her because,
Yeah.
as I say, we've all been there. Where you're at a party, but you might as well be in a room completely by yourself because you're so zoned out from everything that's happening around you because your mind is still within everything that you're thinking about and everything that you're going through. So that I miss you, it's like it's recognizable, and we see that. Like we've all been there, we've all done that.
No,
Um,
and I completely understood, get where you're coming from, because I also wasn't a big fan of Amber in the first season, and
yeah.
but this season I'm really liking her because she's trying to figure it out. She's not trying to be a problem. She's trying to be a solution. She's trying to bring
Mhm.
solutions to the table, not problems. And
Yes.
I think she's been very fair this entire time.
Agreed. Yeah. And as you said, like for people that are like teenagers, they're being really adult about this whole thing. And as I say, like when
Mhm.
we see it in Buffy, when people get superheroes, they grow sorry, when they get like superpowers, they grow up so fast, because they have to. They've got bigger responsibilities than almost kind of maturing in a way. It's like they've got bigger things to worry about very quickly. And I guess if you're dating a
Mhm.
superhero, you've also got bigger things to worry about than, will my boyfriend text me back? You've got bigger things to worry about. So yeah, it makes them all grow up so quickly. Yeah, and then we go back to the dorm room. Obviously, Mark puts the sock on the door, and then Alan says, in the planet that I come from, that means that someone's fucking. And I love the delivery on that line with Seth Rogen, and like Alan's face, when like he raises his eyebrows when he does it. It's just so fucking good. Um,
And Mark says, "Yeah, my role too," and he closes
yeah,
the door.
yeah, and
So,
he's like, oh, and just shuts the door. Love it. And then yeah, what do they talk about?
well, they go in. Alan coyly sits on the bed, crushes it,
Mm-hmm.
and then Mark is like, "Oh, you're looking really buff
Mm-hmm.
lately." And he's like, "Yeah, that comes from surviving a Viltrumite." And obviously, we realize at that point that it's Alan and Mark that are endgame,
Mm-hmm.
not Mark and Amber.
Mm-hmm.
But no, but they,
Keep going,
he's like,
Alistair.
hey, no, he's like, hey, I know another Viltrumite that broke off.
Yep.
Besides you, it's him and you. Um, I'm gonna take you back so that we can find a way to defeat the Viltrumites. Go to war. And Mark was like I've just been to space twice. Like I've been gone for too long. I can't go again.
Yeah.
But I think that I might have kind of a solution that you can bring back to your people. And he starts going through the books with Alan, with possible solutions to the problem that they're both facing from two different worlds.
Absolutely that. And then straight away, like Alan's like, look, Thetis is going to be pissed that I'm not taking you back, but this will probably lessen the blow. Let me scan the books. And like even he's reading them. Alan, he's like, yeah, I know this. Like what he's written about. This, and he talks about like, oh, like there was this one character who apparently did these things, and this is apparently a myth, but it also is said that to be true. And like he's kind of reflecting all of it, saying this isn't just some like random idea from Nolan's mind. Like this is experience right here.
Mhm.
This is stuff that we could potentially use, as we say, about that weapon, about like this planet and like these creatures and everything like that. So obviously, yeah, he does a scan of the books and he says, like, look, I'm gonna go back. Thetis is probably gonna be pissed as fuck, but I'm not going to drag you there. I'm not going to fight you. Alan does say as well, where he's like, oh, Omniman, he might be in a prison or something. Like, I've heard about a prison, but I'll ask around about it. And then obviously, William, I love this as well. Once Alan gone, and then William's at the door, and he's like, are you and Amber done yet? 'Cause I've been waiting outside for like ever.
I know. I need to, she's like, I need to come in.
Yeah, like I need to come in, actually go to sleep. Um, and then we go to the space prison, Alistair, which we see Nolan in there with General Krieg. Do you remember him from like the season kind of finale, like the middle part of this season when we saw him come down,
Yes.
obviously with the other Viltrumites? And he said to Mark, remember, he said, when I come back, I will be recruiting you, and humanity better not repel against me because, kill a few hundred of them to get them on side. But if they repel, I will wipe them out. And like he does not take any shit. Even when he's interrogating Nolan, he's like, tell me, like, come back to the Empire, like come back, like all will be forgiven if you come back with us and just go back to doing what you were supposed to be doing. Why is it that suddenly you've turned like this? How did this person, this human, get inside your mind? And I love that Nolan just says nothing, just stares at him.
Yeah, he's like, and then the general is like, if he was able to if this world was able to do this to you, then they need to be wiped out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because before that we kind of had like a couple of not scenes, but little looks at other prisoners who were
Yeah.
either non-Viltrumites or possibly half Viltrumites. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a prison break. Well, there's probably going to be a prison break, and if Omni-Man is going to list the rest of the prisoners into that debacle.
Just sorry, when you said prison break, I'm just thinking Michael Schofield is in there, like with the tattoos of the prison, just breaking them all
But
out.
but we haven't seen Omni-Man without. his clothes very recently. So
No, no, it's not even going to be Omni-Man. It's literally going to be Michael Scofield in that prison to break Omni-Man out. Can you imagine?
or Mark goes and gets tattoos and goes to the prison, and he's like, we're gonna get out of this.
He's like, I'm breaking you out of here. Oh man, give me a new season of Prison Break just like that. I'd be well up for it. But yeah, and then we have like a very small scene when we cut back to Livingston. So he was obviously the astronaut that got taken over by the Sequids way back when. He's like looking around the apartment. He's like, oh my god, this like guy basically wrecked the place. He then goes to vomit into the sink after smelling something really rancid. And then a little sequid swims around
Mm.
in the sink and then jumps back onto his face and retakes over him again.
I was like, I'm tired for you, man. Um, yeah, that really sucked, especially coming back to his apartment that's already wrecked. He's already been
Mhm.
violated and gone for so long,
Yeah.
and then back to maybe having an egg that he swallowed or something
Mhm.
that pops up, and now being back to being possessed.
Mhm.
I wonder if he's going to be possessed for long, or if it's going to want to change hosts.
I know, right? And like the
Yeah.
line he had earlier as well when he was like, "Oh, like, they never let me sleep. I'm so like knackered. I'm tired." And he's like, "They never let me sleep." And now he's like, literally, he's had some rest. He's come back to an apartment that's a shithole, and vomits, and then gets taken back over again. He's just like, "Oh my God, do I get away from this?" And then we get the end title, but it is not the end, Alistair, because who do we see right here, right at the end of the episode?
Yeah, Angstrom. Yeah, praying on his suit. I don't think the suit fit him very well, honestly. I think he needs to go for like a cloak or a hooded something.
Ooh, a cloak would be good.
Y-
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think the suit was the right one for his current physique.
Mm,
But then we see him walk through like a Jurassic like world, walk through
mhm,
several worlds, and then walk into that last world, which could either be the world that we're currently in Invincible, or the world with the evil mark.
mhm. Very true. It almost looked like Times Square where he was at the end.
It did
Um,
look like Times Square.
You know what I mean? Had the big tower. But that's a very good point, Alistair. Like, although that we recognize that world, we did see another version of the world that we know, as you say, with Evil Mark, Evil Nolan. We do not know. But we do know that he wants revenge, obviously, on Mark. That's what we do know. But yeah,
Mhm.
big shock because I even said last episode, I was like, we've got all these things still going on. We haven't seen General Krieg again. Like, we haven't seen Angstrom again. Remember that guy? And now they're starting to bring it all back because after this episode, Alistair, we've got two left and that's it. So,
Is it
like,
only two after this?
two. That's it. They're only doing 8 episodes. Done.
And then
S-
we're gonna have to wait 3 to 5 years? Oh my gosh.
No, no, because, and this is why I mentioned in the last episode, Stephen Yeun confirmed and Robert Kirkman confirmed that they've already started production on season three. Like that's already been underway. And that's
Oh,
specifically
good.
because I know, specifically because, and even Robert Kirkman said, I don't want to have the long gap between seasons because the season one started in like 2000, sorry, it was 2021 when it started, and then when we got
Was
to
it
this
2021 or
season
was
two,
it 2020? Was it
2021,
2021? Because it
2021.
felt like
Yeah.
a COVID project. Like everybody
Yeah.
wasn't able to act, so they were able to get a bunch
Hmm.
of great voices in,
Yeah.
and just do a COVID
Hmm.
project, and then everybody started getting like busy again. It
Yeah.
was hard to like do that.
It was like one of the lockdowns, like when it was all going on, like the thick of it. But yeah, but they've actually said, look, we don't want to wait too long between seasons again. We understand people have got other projects to do. Plus, like, how long we waited, like between season one and season two was a long time. So give me more of it straight away. But yeah, Alistair, that wraps up our coverage now of episode 6. And as I say, we've only got 2 left. But this is wild, man. Like they've still got so
I
much
know.
that they're building up to. Like we've got Angstrom back now. We've got General Krieg going on. Like Nolan's obviously up in the air in this prison. We've got the Sequids are not gone. Like we've got heroes that have died. Like everything is going on. And this is wild, man. So yeah, give me your overall thoughts of this episode and then give me your rank out of 10 for this episode.
I really enjoyed this episode. I think that they were able to really expertly juggle plot lines throughout the
Hmm.
episode. Where even though we took pauses and went to other scenes, it all felt very seamless, and I didn't feel
Yeah.
frustrated when we were moving on to another scene. It just felt very seamless,
Hmm.
especially with the narrative of the story. I would say that this episode, um, overall enjoyment 9, but I think overall execution 10.
Yeah.
So I guess a 9.5.
That's a really good way
Yeah.
of looking at it, actually. And I agree a lot with what you said there. Like, I love Invincible does this really good thing where, the world keeps building out, but we keep moving forward with the characters that we know. So, like, the world does get bigger. We've got multiverses now where there's so much that could potentially be going on. But we're not, for me personally, I don't feel like I'm getting lost, like there's too much going on because we're still grounded by the likes of Mark, Debbie, Eve, like the C's or these characters that we know. And they're just moving forward within this world that's expanding out and more things are happening around the characters that we know. Like they are our anchors that keep us to what we know in the show. But I love this episode in particular because it is kind of dealing with how big everything is, like everything, that is going on with all the different multiple storylines, the different villains, everything that's happening. And yet it still moves forward emotionally, where we have these moments where we can just pause and just reflect on the emotion of each character with like Immortal and then with like Rex in hospital, with Adam Eve, like, with Amber, like we still get moment to breathe and pause with all of these characters. And that's what I really love about this. But yeah, like for me, I have
Mhm.
written down 9 out of 10, like straight away in mind, because it's just I had 9 out of 10 for the last episode as well. It builds on that so incredibly well, and I'm just excited to see where we go in the future. But yeah, I want to say a big thank you again, Alistair, for jumping on to come on and cover Invincible. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and this was an incredible episode to talk about. And yeah, I'm just excited for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I really appreciate you in inviting me on for this. I think this season's gonna. I think this show is gonna stand the test of time as long as it comes out in a regular way, in a way other superhero, I'd say franchises are struggling, because it really just focuses on characters and character
Yeah.
development. And
Mhm.
really looking forward to see how that concludes. I really appreciate you having me on, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely anytime. But
I know it's hard to
yeah.
deal with my schedule, so.
Yeah, no, honestly, I appreciate it, Alistair. Thank you so much. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
All social media as at Alastair J. Patton. And then I am also frequently featured in my husband's YouTube channel on AZB, and then AZB Plus on Patreon. I do the Hello Gentle Viewers show on Patreon, where we cover books, and yeah, and Coffee and Tequila, which right now we're on a hiatus until I get back from deployment. But once I get back from deployment, we should be starting that back up.
It's going to come back bigger and better. It's going to be the best version of it. You just wait, everyone.
Yes. More
But
coffee, more tequila, more problems.
yeah, you talk about it all. But yeah, so as I also said, make sure you go and check him out on all of that, and obviously his husband Zachary Patton-García as well. Remember that we do have video versions of the podcast. So if you are listening to this and any of the other previous episodes, we do have video versions up on YouTube that you could watch us talk about it as well. So if you type in last week on podcast, you will find that on my YouTube page. If you do want to follow the podcast on all socials, it is last week on pod. If you type that in, you'll find it on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call that hellscape, or Instagram as well. We're on there as well. If you want to follow me personally, I am at Straughan87 across all social media. Come and say hello to me on there. And the podcast is available on all streaming platforms. But again, I do want to say a massive thank you again, Alistair, for coming on, obviously working around your schedule. Because I know you love the show, you love talking about Invincible. And it's a pleasure having you on, man.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, until next time, everyone, take care.
Adios.